Before we move on, I told you this morning that Delia was just running a little late. Well, she's not so well this morning, so she won't be with me this morning. But I will be joined by one of my colleagues, I hope, sooner than later. As we move on, quarantining for 14 days for those who've been exposed to COVID-19 is key to stopping the spread of the virus. But our workers to get paid during this period, we have with us Helene Davis-White. She's the president of the Jamaica Confederation of Trade Unions and a trade union activist. Good morning, Mrs. Davis-White. How are you?
Morning, Neville. I'm doing well, thanks.
Great to have you with us this morning. Does it matter the reason you were exposed? In other words, does it matter if you get exposed because you went to a party? Does it matter if you were exposed at someone at work? Does it matter? And are you suggesting that the workers should be paid?
Well, we would say it does not matter because, in the midst of a pandemic, if one were to go through how it is a worker became exposed and therefore had to be quarantined, we would be opening up a can of worms that would be very difficult to monitor and to ensure that workers wouldn't be dealt a raw deal as such. So for us, it is more a matter of whether or not the local health authorities, including your individual doctor, believes that you should be quarantined based on them doing contact tracing and recognizing that you would have come into contact with someone who had or has COVID-19. So that to us is what should be the real means of deciding whether or not a person should be quarantined. And so going into the reason why the person had to be quarantined, I think would be a waste of time.
Okay. Does it matter whether you're a full-time worker or a worker on contract?
We don't believe it should, because at the end of the day, based on what is happening with the pandemic and what the government, the local health authorities have determined, it means that they have determined that once you've been exposed as a worker, whether you're on contract or not, it would be a situation that you should be quarantined. And if we just look at it logically, why should it matter? Because I'm still a worker and I have to be at work. And, if it is that it has been determined that I should be quarantined, it shouldn't matter whether I'm on contract or whether or not I'm a permanent employee.
Yeah. Are you advocating for full salary here?
We are. You see, the truth of the matter is that if it is that we are going to be saying to workers that you are going to be losing pay while you are on quarantine, then that worker would quite rightly say, but I am not the one who is deciding whether or not I should be at work. That decision has been taken out of my hands. And why should I now lose pay because of a situation that has come up, a health situation that has come up? And it is about the health of the nation at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And so it should not be that a worker has to pay the cost of being quarantined in a situation where it is not up to them. The choice is not theirs. If the choice were theirs, I'm pretty sure they would be at work no matter how they are feeling, whether or not they have actually started to display symptoms or not. Workers want to be paid in today's environment, and again, the economic environment has shifted a bit because of the pandemic. To then say to that worker, you are facing increased costs of goods and services, and at the same time, you must be denied your pay or portions of your pay, is not something that we think any good employer would want to be involved in.
Yep. I'm sure there are companies, there are employers who don't pay people for different reasons when they're off because of COVID. What do you say to those companies, to those employers? And double-barrel question, What happens elsewhere, as far as you know, in other jurisdictions, maybe in the United States and elsewhere, as far as you know? But what do you say first to the employers who don't agree with you?
Well, I think we, as has been said, and we have seen several employers since the vaccines have come around, been saying that we want to ensure that our workers are protected, et cetera, and that means that you are thinking about the interest of the worker. If you are thinking about the interest of the worker, it cannot be that you should be denying the worker the wages while they have to deal with quarantine. And I would want to add as well, added to the quarantine is also the question of no movement days, because there are some employers who believe that they should not pay their workers for no movement days. Again, a situation that's outside of the control of the worker, and some employers believe that the workers should pay the cost of that. We are saying that that should not happen, and we believe a good employer, if you have the interest of your workers at the forefront of your mind, you should want to ensure that they are paid, because at the end of the day, when they come off quarantine and they would have racked up debts, you now have a dissatisfied worker in your midst, and you want to ensure that you have your workers satisfied so that productivity can be at its highest. So we would certainly encourage all employers to pay their workers both during no movement days and while they are on quarantine as well, because it is for the greater good at the end of the day.
Yep.
In terms of what happens elsewhere, most countries of the world had nothing in place in terms of dealing with quarantine. The laws did not speak to something like quarantine. And in many countries, what they have done is to amend their laws to provide for, some call it different names, but essentially pandemic leave is one that several countries have actually implemented since the onset of the pandemic. We, as the Confederation of Trade Unions, we have actually recommended that that should be an amendment that is made to our labor laws to ensure that there are no gray areas, because the real gray area is that in terms of absence from work, it's usually about sick leave, and some companies may have what may be called departmental leave. It doesn't fall under any of those really, and so we have asked that our labor laws be amended to provide for something that we would want to call pandemic leave.
Yeah, that was my final question. You kind of answered it, but I'll ask it anyway. What about those companies where, all right, you'll get paid, but it's your sick leave? You get 2 weeks off and we'll pay you because you're sick. That's
no, and I mean, if you really want to be technical, it's not sick leave because I'm not sick. And you may take the worker's sick leave to deal with quarantine, and then the worker ends up becoming sick somewhere down the road. It could be sick in terms of the very same contracting the very same COVID-19 virus. What are you going to then do when the workers leave? Sick leave would have been exhausted, and now that the worker is sick, they cannot get leave. So this is why we believe you should not be using the sick leave for that purpose. The sick leave is for a defined purpose, and it should remain that way.
Yeah, I did say final question, but can anything happen to an employer, a company that does not pay if you're on quarantine?
Unfortunately, not in Jamaica, no, because the laws do not actually require it. And so this is why we are saying that you have to do the amendment to the law.
Yep.
And happily, the ministry has put in place a labor market task force. We wait to see what the report of that task force is, and certainly the recommendations, because we did make our representation to that task force about the provision of something akin to pandemic leave.
Good to see you. Stay safe. God bless you.
Thanks.
Helene Davis-White, President of the Jamaica Confederation of Trade Unions. More on Smile after the break, and I'll be joined by my son, Dwayne Extal. He'll be with me in just a little while. So come.